I've invited our guest because he has an incredibly powerful story.
My mum died of lung cancer when I was 8. To see him get through that, to see him as a child endure loss and carry on regardless, he's showing the world of what's possible.
When we can change how we're thinking, not just changing our mind, but just start to see a different perspective on ourselves and our lives, our whole experience of life can transform.
You said, what do you want in your life? And I say, oh, this is great. Someone's asked me.
Welcome to the Authentic Man podcast. I am your host, David Chambers. This is a podcast for men who want more and less from life. More deep connection, more emotional intelligence, more self-awareness, and more great sex. And less heartache, less conflict, less overthinking, and less stress. Creating dating lives, sex lives, and relationships that are incredible and authentic. My deepest goal is that you, the listener, can take away what you hear in this podcast and apply it to your life so that you can experience greater happiness, transformational growth, deeper relationships, and profound sexual intimacy. I believe that as men, we are capable of so much more depth than we are shown or led to believe. So join me as we get deep into this.
Welcome back to another episode of the Authentic Man podcast. I'm your host, David Chambers, and this is a episode first, where I'm joined by one of my coaching clients, Samuel Adams, who has an incredibly powerful story, right? I'm not going to say anything more about his story, but it's an incredibly powerful story because it's very humbling, and this conversation will leave you looking at your life and thinking, fuck yeah, I can do more. Fuck yeah, I can show up better. Fuck yeah, these excuses are bollocks. Like, you're going to listen all the way to the end, and you're really going to get a sense of the sort of man that Samuel is and what he's had to overcome in his life. Because we talk a lot about things like, gratitude, facing loss, the loss of parents dying, rejection as well, like failure, having to face like failure and rejection again and again. We talk about the power of like belief as well and not giving up. He really talks about the power of his attitude around not giving up and how he has come to this attitude and how he keeps coming back to that and how he keeps himself in being someone who is committed to creating the life that he wants. It's a very, very powerful conversation. And I know I said that word a lot and I say it during the conference as well, but it is because he really impacts me, even as my coaching client. And we also talk about the sort of work that we do with people and how we do change people's lives, how we do change people's perspectives on what they're experiencing. And, this is one of those episodes that you send to somebody. You send to someone because there's someone that's dealing with something similar. They may not have been born with the same circumstances as Samuel, but they are feeling down about themselves and they're struggling to get up and move forward. And this is the perfect episode to send someone to help them see what's possible for them and help them see what they're capable of. So, you know how to send podcasts to people. There's a link, you know how to do it. It's not too hard, wherever you listen to it. And, that's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to let you get into the episode and really listen to Samuel's story, what he's been through and how he's come out with the attitude that he now has and has continued to have in his life, and how he helps his clients take on his attitude, right? He helps them like feel the energy of his attitude and move that into their lives. So without further ado, get into the episode. This is a very special episode. First, I think, on my podcast is to have someone who has worked with me on the podcast to talk. But more than anything, I've invited our guest because he has an incredibly powerful story of his life, which we'll get into in a second. But first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Samuel Adams. How are you doing, Samuel?
I'm doing well, David. Thanks so much for having me on, and looking forward to what's to come.
Awesome. And I think it's probably best to start off by just, introducing yourself, letting the listeners know, what work it is that you bring to the world.
So many things I would like to say. I'm a coach like yourself, and very much focused on wanting individuals to see the possibility that they have within them that they maybe haven't been shown before or haven't been allowed to see within themselves, and remove those blocks of, damaging thinking perhaps, and letting them see what's out there, which is anything, anything's possible for them. So I do a bit of that, and then also hoping to get into, speaking, currently writing my first book, bit of everything, just at the beginning of the journey, and excited to see where it goes.
Awesome, man. Yeah, and, I think Samuel's doing himself a disservice there. He's a very, very talented coach, really helping people move through the things that are holding them back in life. That's the experience from the conversations we've had, is like, so many of us are being held back by our assumptions about life, the things we think are holding us, that are outside of us, that are holding us back. And Samuel has a real talent for guiding and help people, move through that into a new paradigm, to a paradigm shift of, as you said, Samuel, possibility, living from a land of possibility.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's true. And I think, when we realize that, when we realize that one powerful conversation with someone can change their life, or when someone can come up to me and say, I just feel better having just had a 5-minute conversation with you, there's something there, and something that isn't there for all those many people that I talk to. And it's true for me, and I'm sure it's true for you, that this needs to be something that I do my bit to change, because it's simply not right that people are putting up with what they're given, thinking that that's all they can have, because it's simply not true.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much more. It's, as you said, I had a conversation with one of my other clients today, and we're coming to the end of we worked together for about 3 months now, and he said something I think was quite profound. He was like, you haven't changed anything in my outer life, obviously, because I can't change anything in his outer life, because I'm not in his life to be changing things.
Mm-hmm.
I can't move around things. Yeah, but he said, when I came to you, I was feeling so down and so low about so many of the possibilities in my life and what was happening in my life at the time. I've worked with him around his work and also his dating life. And he's like, but what you've enabled me to do is really shift and change a lot of the thought patterns and processes that I was having about myself and having about other people. And in changing those and transforming those, he's like, his whole experience of his life has shifted. He's showing up at work far more confidently. He's enjoying his dating life. He's creating better connections and so forth. And as you said there, it's like when we can change how we're thinking, right? Not just changing our mind, but just start to see a different perspective on ourselves and our lives, our whole experience of life can transform.
Mm-hmm. And, that really speaks to the power of the work that we do, and why it's so important that many people haven't had that. They haven't had that guiding light, that person that truly wants to care, truly wants to listen in their life. And many people should have this individual or individuals somewhere in their life for free. But even if they haven't, if they've never experienced this, the fact that people like yourself or like me or like many others that we both know are out there doing this work, providing this service, this service to others, is so important.
Yeah, it changes lives, man. It changes lives. Or as someone said to me recently on Instagram, they were like, "You're doing God's work," and I was like, "Thank you." I do try. But it'd be awesome for the listeners, and I know plenty of you, but it'd be good to know, what was your journey to be doing this work that you do now as a coach?
We'll get into it all, I'm sure, as we record, and the whole journey would be uncovered. But I really do believe it started at birth. I was born about 22 weeks premature, and that's an age at which today mothers would be advised to abort the baby because there's no quality of life there. And if there is, it's going to be incredibly limited, so much so it's not worth having the child. But here I am, and I think just that thought of I'm here and I'm here to be something more. It's always been important to me that, you know, if I am possibility, then I need to give that back to others.
Yeah, because a lot, as you said before, a lot of people don't see the possibility in their lives. And, you know, for the listeners, like you said, you were born at 22 weeks premature, which is, if I remember, I'm just doing my calculations there, that you were born at 18 weeks.
Yes, that's right. So I was born essentially at about the 4.5 month stage. So I was inside my, mum's womb for essentially half the time that I should have been.
Wow, that's incredible. Really incredible.
Mm-hmm. And I think for me, when I see those diagrams of, this is the journey of a baby inside and what a baby should be or should look like if they were to be born halfway through the pregnancy. And then I look at me, I'm always blown away. I've been blessed.
Definitely. And how has that being born so early impacted you and your life, particularly your kind of early life?
So I was born so premature, that I was bathed in a kidney dish, which are the little dishes I'm sure a lot of your listeners or viewers will know that, you're kind of given to throw up in. So incredibly small, but that was my bath. And I was, you could have held me in the palm of your hand. That's how small I was. So I didn't weigh anything. I was an incredibly small little thing. And the result of that is that I have cerebral palsy. And that's really a result of being so premature, being in the incubator, being given that oxygen that I need to survive. The result of all of that good oxygen that's kept me alive has been that I have cerebral palsy. Some people are incredibly affected by it. I have been, again, blessed with how fortunate that I really haven't been. My walking has been affected. I've had operations and what have you to improve them. And my vision also in my right eye, I can't see out of that. So right from the word go, that's impacted how I've lived my early life.
Yeah, that's a big impact. And also, a big impact on because I know your family, your mother, your father, it's really to come into their life there. And I'm interested in, how did that kind of manifest through, how did that impact you through schooling? Because I know, we've had plenty of conversations about what school was like for you and how that kind of impacted and how people saw you. So like, what was that like for you growing up?
So school was, I look back now and I reflect upon it. School was a great experience. And again, that's just me seeing the positive and the possibility, but it was. But on a very realistic level, what was it like? It was a journey of being, called names that I won't even mention on the podcast here, and people, having an assumption, a belief about an individual because of how they walk or the fact that they can't see or that they've got a learning support system, in the classroom to enable them to get the work done that they need doing. So bullying by certain people, even in fact some people with disabilities, have been the ones to do that bullying, has, it made school tricky. It essentially meant I left school, despite my best efforts. I left school and indeed uni without work. No, not uni, but I left school. I left secondary school without really making any friends, any lasting, lifelong connections. And for a lot of people, who's going to be my friend and is so and so going to talk to me today is a huge part of school life, and that was a part of school life that really wasn't there for me.
And that must have been difficult for you.
Yes, difficult in the sense that I've not got what other people have got. At the same time, is that, is that what is expected, or is it just what we think we deserve? If this person's got this shiny new toy, I want it too. I deserve it too. Well, do I? And I think then and there were the very beginnings of, I'm not going to put a meaning on this. I'm not going to let that mean anything about me. I'm not going to let those names that those children are calling me mean anything about me. It's simply what is. And, the support network initially of my mum, but, especially of my dad, has been huge in really installing that power of belief into me to, which enabled me to get through school. And I think, that's what I was. I was an average student, but always knew I was destined for more. And I was going to do my damn hardest to make sure that I get that.
And that's incredible, right? Because what I'm hearing there is like other people had these assumptions about who you were, your capacity, your ability, right? And, bullies, school kids at school can be pretty mean and pretty horrible, right, to people. And the sort of names and ways they treat people can be, pretty disgusting, right? And I imagine there's probably a few listeners sitting around listening, just hearing you speak and being like, shit, I bullied people at school. Like I said things to people that could have really impacted them in many ways. And, I'm sure some of those names and that bullying has impacted you beyond, just the school years. But I'm really hearing in there from you was like, because of the support that you had in your life and the people around you, that you didn't take on other people's assumptions about you. They might have, they're going to touch you, they're going to be there, right? But, you didn't take those on for yourself. And, I know from our conversations that, a big part of that was your mother and father, having such a profound impact on you. So I'd love to hear, how was it that your parents created such an environment for you that you had your own belief in you and your capability and resisting, what the outside world was telling you about who you were?
So I'd also add to what I've just said that teachers at school, support staff were people who were really able to enable me to see me and install that belief in me. So I had it at school with adults, not with children, but with adults. And again, with adults at home, with my mum and with my dad. It really, just the very simple things like being them reinforcing my story, my journey into the world onto me, and how special that was, how fortunate I was to be alive. And if my dad would ever catch me leaning on something, for example, he would say, don't do that, use the two legs that God's given you. And, my legs may not be working, may not work as, say, everyone else's do, but I've been given them, I've been blessed with them. He would always tell me that, I could complain about, having maybe shoes that would wear out far too quickly. But then there are people in the world that aren't born with legs. So is that really a complaint? And just that constant, and it really was a constant. It was something which was, I would say, almost an everyday occurrence. Someone who saw the possibility within me, to be around that, literally 24/7, kind of really brings you back to the type of thing I really want to give to my clients, to those I even talk with, just spend time with, to be around 24/7, it can't not have a huge impact. And it certainly has. It's a powerful legacy.
So what I get there is that, like, your parents, as you said, the parents were always reinforcing the story to you of who you could be, the possibility of, you know, who Samuel could be in the world, and your own kind of specialness and how fortunate you are to be alive and to be living this life and to kind of be making the most of your life. Is that also something that kind of came through from your parents?
Definitely, you know, that they would always relay back to me stories of, you know, when you were born, we were there with another couple in the hospital and they had a baby born at a very similar, you know, early stage that you were, 22 weeks, but they didn't survive, you know. But you, and we're still in touch with the family now, but you did. And you hear that, and even as a child, and at least as a teenager, as things went on, I kind of sit back and go, you know, wow. And I suppose I could not have. I could be doing anything, right? I could be having a job in a supermarket, and, you know, we'll talk about some of the people that I've spoken with that do that type of thing. But I could be doing anything. But the fact that that specialness is really at the forefront of what they instilled in me, I just knew, you know, it's wrong to not be the best you can be.
And so what I kind of getting is, like, from a young age, you were being taught the gratitude of life, of gratitude of living, right? Mm-hmm. The focus was, and obviously, you know, I imagine it can't always be, but your parents were kind of showing you the importance of focusing on what you do have and the life you do have, and not necessarily spending so much of your energy focusing on the things that you don't have, whether that be, you know, when you're at school, friends at school, or, you know, it might be athletic ability, or, you know, being able to play in all the sports teams and so forth. And I imagine there was part of you that was sad times and cried and felt really, you know, out of place and so forth. But your parents were always there. The adults around you were always there to also tell you this, like, you're alive. Like, you've got a life to live and you can do amazing and special things. Yeah, these current moments might be difficult, right? But actually there's so much to be grateful for, just being here, just being alive on this earth.
Right. And, you know, gratitude is such a huge part, not only a huge part in my life, but I really feel for a lot of people, it's that missing piece, that if they had a little bit more gratitude, they'd see a bit more possibility, or perhaps a lot more possibility. The power of gratitude, of taking stock in what you have and how far you've come, and the difficulties you've been through, the rubbish you've had to deal with to get to the point that you've got to right now in your life, is not to be taken lightly. Yet people don't delve into the negative side of things. They don't want to wade through all of that shit that they've been through to look anew at what they've got. And that's a huge missing piece that people need. People really do need to understand the power of gratitude, and then of giving, you know, of understanding what the definition of gratitude is, and the many ways in which we can display it, because it's been a transformational learning for me.
Got it. Yeah, it's a really, you know, there was a point in my life I did, someone sent me a link to someone doing a gratitude challenge, and she was doing something where, you know, you wrote like 108 things every day that you're grateful for. And, you know, it was a really powerful thing to sit down and do, because you would have to, you know, I'd have to sit down and find 108 things to be grateful for in the moment. Yeah. And, you know, there were times where I'd be sitting down, and I remember it because it was when I was back living in London, and there would be times where, you know, I remember when she was giving out the instructions, she was like, it can be big or small, you know, you can be grateful for there's air to breathe. You can be grateful that you've got a brand new car. You can be grateful that you woke up in the morning, whatever it is. And it was really profound to like every day I did that, I think, for like 21 days. And a lot of the time it really had an effect to be able to shift how I was feeling about myself and my life. Because when I touched on all the things I was grateful for, it's like the things that were not right, or the problems or the challenges I had in my life started to pale in insignificance to all the things that I was actually grateful for.
Right. And I mean, that's it. That's how I feel. That's honestly how I've lived life. It's almost as if I've forever and always written a gratitude journal, despite the fact I haven't. It's just installed in me. And, it's full, it's at the top, and now it's overflowing and can be given back to others. And this idea that, you just speak about there, the power of being grateful, I once listened to a speech that, of all people, Denzel Washington, the actor, gave, and he speaks about, when you're charging your phone, if you have to charge it in your room overnight, you really probably shouldn't do, but that's a different conversation altogether regarding productivity and, morning routines. But if you have to charge it in your room, make sure it's, under your bed. And the reason you should do it under your bed is that you're going to have to switch that alarm off at the beginning of each morning, but you're going to have to get down on your knees and reach under the bed to switch off that alarm. And he speaks about, while you're down there, take a moment to be thankful for all that you've got, for this blessed new day where anything and everything is possible, and really be grateful and feel it, and allow yourself to literally breathe in the opportunity that this day gives you, which is probably going to be a lot of small incremental changes, but boy, do they add up.
So I have another program coming up in September, 12-week program this time, because I see a lot of men desiring to show up in their lives with more leadership, more expression, more connection, more depth, more openness. So I have my program, Being an Authentic Masculine Man. And in this program, really, I help men cultivate the depth they want, the deep presence and self-awareness that they haven't been able to find on their own, to really express themselves more openly and more honestly. Through the program, men have really shed a lot of shame, been able to show up powerfully in their relationships, been able to express themselves and feel confident in their dating lives, and really let go of a lot of sexual shame as well. And this is just the content, right? Like I said, the men that have been on the program in the past, they've come back and said it's completely changed their lives. It's helped them build new relationships and friendships with depth and with honesty, of openness that they never thought was possible. So if you're interested in this program, which is going to be starting in September for 12 weeks, go into the show notes and you can find all the details to sign up, and we'll have a conversation about how you can jump on.
Yeah, just stopping we don't stop often to think of all the things that are wonderful in our lives, as we said. And I'd love to get into a bit more about your father, because I know from our conversations that he's, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, he had quite a profound impact on your life. Tell me a little bit more about your father.
I'm kind of pausing because it's such a wonderful open question. And I mean, a bit more about him. I mean, he was, and I only really discovered this after he died, was how, and he died of a cardiac arrest, but of how much of an impact he had on my life. He was my best friend, really, when I didn't have one. And that's huge. He was someone who would always instill that possibility in me, instill that belief. Someone who my mum died when I was of lung cancer when I was 8. They'd been together, they'd been married for, I think they'd been together for at least 30 years, almost 30 years. And to see him get through that, to see him as a child and then as a teenager endure loss and carry on regardless, that's an example of something that he's not even giving me, but he's showing the world of what's possible. You can raise 2 young boys, and because you have no choice. Because when you're faced with the possibility of this is something you've really got to do, you would do it. He'd always tell me, if you were a fireman in a burning building, and it's a bizarre example, and he'd say, if you were to break your legs, you would think, I can't walk, I'm going to perish in the fire. He would always say the stories that he's been told by people that he knew that suddenly are able to walk and move forward and actually escape the burning building in that fire, despite the injuries or whatever they think they've got wrong with them, whatever they're thinking up here in their mind. Pales in comparison, and they realize in that moment of, oh my God, this is what's possible. This is what I can do. And he was it was reincarnation of that for me and for my brother, in front of our eyes of, this is what's possible. This is how you can face bereavement and you can carry on. And that's been, that's extraordinary to, to see, a strong man, and strong, not in a traditional kind of masculine word or way when we think of the word strong, but in other ways. And that's impactful, and it impacts me, it, touches me even to this day.
It's really shaped his way of being, and his attitude is really, translated into you, has been passed on into you.
Yes. I look at my siblings and I look at me and I think, I've definitely got his sense of humour. I'm always concerned, whenever we're doing coaching sessions or whatever it is, it's never coming out. It's all very serious. But I've definitely got that. I would, if I were to go to work, I'd end up making someone in the office laugh every day. I haven't intended to do that. I'm just being me. But it's simply coming out of me, and that's something that he had that sense of approaching every situation with a smile, seeing the best in people, and that humorous side of life, that if you smile, then things are gonna just appear a little bit brighter and a little bit better than what they may have done. And then you combine that with a teaching one that comes to mind is don't put off until tomorrow what you can do today, and bang, this all leads me to where I am now. These are huge pieces of advice that many people never get.
Many people never have someone in their lives who really believes in who they can be and what's possible for them. Unconditional belief is kind of what's coming through from what you're saying.
Yeah. And I think it was that sense of, and I find the same actually, in my work with you, is that it's amazing to have unconditional belief in someone's possibilities, because it's so powerful. And people will always put this is so much of coaching, right? People put a cap. They think I can only go here, when actually they can go there, but they just don't want to find that difference. If you realized you could go further, everything would change. And there was that sense of unconditional belief. And I think you need the right support network. You need the right people with you. You need to ask for help. That's a huge thing that my dad has taught me after his death, is he didn't do that enough. He didn't ask for help. If he did, he'd be here now. Doesn't make you any less of a man to not ask for help. Pride mustn't kill another person as far as I'm concerned. But going back to unconditional belief, it's very powerful when it's combined, almost if it was like a potion, right? It has to be combined with the correct other factors and mixed in the exact perfect way to get like the perfect cocktail.
And what do you see as that perfect cocktail?
I think, a huge part of it has to be the the support network that you have to bounce. You need to bounce ideas. You need to. Unconditional belief on its own is great, but then you need someone to almost keep you in check, keep you in line, and be there with you. I think actually for my dad, this is something that he really struggled with after my mum died. He was, 16 years without her before he then died. And that was a tough time. He'd lost his best friend and the person who had, kept the reins on everything. And it's incredibly important that we have those people in our life. And if we don't have those people, we go and sort them out. We build the network that we deserve to have around us. It's something, very important to me, is that, if Jim Rohn tells us, right, we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. So you've got to be around the right people. And by doing so, you can create that perfect cocktail of, unconditional love and possibility and, gratitude and a few more things thrown in too. But I think you mix it all up and you shake it. I mean, you probably get me, but you also, this isn't unique to me at all. And, if you're listening to this and you're thinking I'm just one element short of that, then you owe it to yourself to keep at it, to find out what that is. Because, if I could bottle it and sell it to you, I most certainly would do.
I'm sure you would. You'd probably try and give it away for free.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness.
And just to change track a little bit, because I know that, part of your story is that you're, I think by the time your early 20s, you'd already, both your parents had already passed away by this point. And, that must have been difficult in and of itself.
Children are so resilient, and, they are. And I truly, one of the thoughts that comes to mind, I can remember shortly after, in fact, my mum was probably ill at that point. And, one of my sisters was breaking down, being consoled by my dad about the loss of, my mum and what that meant. And my brother and I were just in the bathroom cleaning our teeth, and there's no emotion to it. You're just doing what needs to be done. It was one of those examples of, hey, dad says you've got to clean your teeth, and that's what you do. So that, that kind of that innocence that children are blessed with is a huge blessing. At the same time, I could flip it and I could say I've been denied an amazing life with, I'm sure, someone who was an amazing woman. But to think about that, to kind of go down that track, again, is going to be a disservice, and it's just going to bring up, feelings of that I've been robbed, and why me, why not you, because life really is precious, and that's what my journey has taught me. And then losing my mum certainly has. When I think back to an example of I must have been about 6 or 7, but this always sticks in my mind, is that she had cancer, and the ice cream van came along and she said, you want me to give you some money? You can go down to the ice cream man and you can get an ice cream. And I said, oh no, that's okay. One, I remember thinking in that moment, Dad would never allow me to do that. My goodness. And I said no. But the second point that really stuck out to me is that I knew at that point she was ill, and I wanted to spend that time with her, even as being like 6 or 7, something you like, no, I want to spend this time. I just want to sit and be with you. And yeah, that always stays with me, because none of us know how long we've got. And when I hear stories of the most heartbreaking thing for her, my dad would always tell me, was that she would not get to see my brother and I grow up. it wasn't the fact that she was dying or that she'd missed whatever else, is that she simply didn't get the opportunity to see my brother and I grow up, and all she wanted for us to be was happy. And I can certainly say that I am, but I also feel a sense of real, I think I said earlier, of keeping a legacy alive. And no one will write a book or tell their story or their impact, but everything starts somewhere. And it's, hey, like I said, everything starts somewhere. And I wish I had more to tell you. I wish you meant more to me. I wish I had great memories, but I don't. And, such is life.
Yeah, it must be very difficult to have, like you said, there's always kind of not just two ways, because you can look at things both ways, and the times that you missed having a mother when you saw other people, but also you saw the blessing in that as well, and you saw the best you could see in those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to kind of fast forward, actually, because this is part of your story. I think is one of the really powerful parts of your story, actually, is around when you finished university and you started looking for a job.
Yeah. And it's funny you say, oh, it's really powerful, and it is, and it's powerful because not only was it kind of the last rung of the ladder, looking back now, but it had come after everything else. And I think at that point, I felt like, well, I've lost my mum, I've lost my dad, I've got cerebral palsy, I can't see, I've been bullied at school, I've been through operations which have put me back into school, and, recovered, and so much else. Part of me thinks, well, I've done it now, I've had all the bad stuff, it's going to be good. But then I got a degree, computing degree, loved doing the course, met probably my oldest friend there, who I'm still in touch with, just, so remarkable for that. But then after getting that amazing degree and then wanting to embark on the journey of finding work, I took 4 years. It took me 4 years to find that employed job. And a huge part of that, I have no doubt, is disability, is that people will see a disability above anything else. Or perhaps, if I've got 50 CVs, let's go with someone who doesn't have a disability over someone that does. And that makes it incredibly difficult to do. And that was another marathon to run, I suppose, one which I didn't know how long it would be. But it was bloody tough looking back.
Yeah, and I imagine in those 4 years, it was 4 years of applying to jobs, filling out application forms, going to interviews, and nothing really happening. Not really hearing back, or hearing back, the kind of you've not been successful kind of letters and phone calls.
Yeah. And you say there, nothing really happening. And that really sticks out for me, because I can remember I got my first job, a kind of a part-time job, just before my dad died. It was a Christmas job. It was in a department store, and I got it in the November, and it was due to run until the December. My last day of working was Christmas. It was Boxing Day, actually, but I had to work on Christmas Eve, and that was the day when my dad obviously ended up collapsing. He ended up dying on the Christmas day. So I thought, well, I've done it. I've got a job. But then after having him, die, I had to move out of my home and live in a nearby town. I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any friends. and then start looking for work. So I felt lost physically in the sense of a new location, not knowing anyone, but also lost with direction of life, and then also finding work. So that really was my, I was going to say my darkest time, but what it really was that moment of, well, I need to really think now about what I do with my life and where I go.
That's a big question to ask, and there's a lot to have happening all at the same time there, right? That you like you said, I just imagine that after you finish a degree and you're working part-time, and then having your father pass away, collapsing on Christmas Eve, passing on Christmas Day, this man who'd been like, your rock, your best friend, as you described, and everything. And then after that, having to like move out to a new place, feeling lost, and then to embark on this journey to find work. And, like you said there's 4 years of looking for work, right? Which is a long time, right? For anybody. Like, most people get, if, I definitely think of my first job, I was looking for probably 4 to 6 months. People get really despondent, they get really down, they feel like they should give up and so forth. But that wasn't how you tackled it, right? So I'd love to know, how was it during that time when, so many people would be experiencing rejection after rejection, that you were able to kind of keep your not just keep your head up, but like keep believing that the job that you want is going to come for you?
One thing I always believe, and again, something that my dad's taught me, I notice there's a running theme here, is that we only fail at something if we give up on it. If we don't give up on that thing, if we keep going and pushing forward and we achieve the end result, we haven't failed. We've just taken however long it takes to get to that point. So I always had that in the back of my mind, in fact, right from the off. Having said that, the peaks and troughs that I experienced, many of them in those 4 years were difficult, because I had so many close calls. And I think that sense of, I've done it. I'd already got a job at a department store. So I physically felt, well, I've got this. I've done it once. It's not the same. It's a part-time job, but I know what that's like. Let's harness that feeling. There's no reason why I can't do it again. And despite the fact sometimes I have that negative self-talk, or that idea of, can you actually do it again? That driving idea of, yes, I can do it again. I truly believe that I can. It's been a huge driving force in enabling me to carry on, especially with the interviews that I went to. The more interviews I would go to, I would really find that when people didn't realize or see my story, they wanted me to answer a question that was specific to them, to the interview, to the job that I was applying for. And when I thought, well, if you only knew what I'd been through, that again, that sense that they were just firing me up to believe in myself more, that enabled me to carry on to search for other jobs, even if that, at those people said no.
So I'm really getting there that, like, what really helps you keep going was the fact that, you had your story, and that even though many of the job interviews, they have their set questions they want to ask about their particular things.
Right.
And they weren't necessarily asking about you and who you were and the story that brought you here, and, understanding what it took for you to get this far in comparison to other people, right? Because let's be honest, right? If David Chambers, sitting here, born with no disability, have no real impediment to my own success, right? I have, I might have negative self-talk, but it's not, a lot of it can be completely unfounded, right? Or really minor, right? Let's be honest. It's like, the the self-talk of like, I'm not good enough, no one wants me, no one's going to hire me. Like, I might experience that, but really the level of which it is founded from my work, my life experience, because I've had that negative self-talk when I've sat in interviews, definitely. And, I've probably I've probably been to, I don't know now, 30 interviews, probably less actually, probably about 25 interviews in my career, including my tech career, and probably got, 15 of the jobs. So I'm, put pretty high percentage, but actually you were going through a very difficult time to get to find a job. And I'm intrigued, like, how did you overcome in those times? Obviously there's peaks and troughs, as he said, but how did you overcome those times, the negative self-talk that you described?
Going back to gratitude, that's a huge thing, is that, I don't have a job, but I do have, and I can list off 1,000 things that I do have. And keeping those thoughts, those beliefs, those lessons that my dad had taught me in my mind and present in my life have, I'd almost say, were enough. They were enough to keep going because, I think at my worst, I must have had a 6-month period without any jobs or without people, that either don't get back to you or they reply and say no. And I mean, the gym actually was a huge, thing for me, exercise, to just get mentally fit and mentally sharp. I often say, if I didn't have that exercise in my life, I don't know where I'd be. You combine that, the mental boost that exercise gives us with a bit of belief. And I found, it may not be today, but it may be tomorrow. And hey, that tomorrow could be a long way off, that you're one day closer every day to that point. And I won't stop until I get to that point.
Oh. And what I'm hearing there is like, there's this, like, I'm not stopping. I'm not giving up, right? There was a what's the word? I can't think of the word. There's a word for it. Determination. There's a determination of like, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to give up. I think you touched on it earlier. You said it is that, you only fail when you give up, right? So like during your job search, there was this combination of like gratitude for what you do have, right? Yeah, you don't have a job, but there's a gratitude for all the many things in life that you do have. Mm-hmm. You use the gym as a way to, sharpen the mind, sharpen the body as well. There was the belief that it will happen, and also the determination of like, I'm not going to give up. I'm not willing to give up. There's no way I can fail because I'm not going to give up, right? And that's a really powerful kind of combination of things there that, to overcome that self-talk, because, as as a coach, one of the biggest things that stops us in life really is the way we talk to ourselves, right? We talk so negatively to ourselves. We erode away any gratitude because we only look at what's going wrong. Mm-hmm. We allow our self-talk to stop us from going to something like the gym, even though we know it's good for us. Yep. We stop believing in who we are, and then we actually give up, right? And which then leads to the experience we have of being a failure or failing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's simply that, because we've given up, because we haven't continued. We haven't almost done, in the case of the gym, we haven't done that, whatever, that exercise, that habit. We haven't installed that habit in our routine enough to make it a way of life. And when something becomes a way of life, it isn't even something we think about doing. We just do it. Like, I get up every morning and I have breakfast. I'm sure many people all around the world do that. It's because it's a habit, and I'm actually, if you're watching the video at all, or even if you're listening, before we began this recording, David asked me to let's get some kind of ring light on me so you can see me. And I brought over a light, and I'm sat here thinking, Thomas Edison, he failed over 1,000 times to get electricity and get the light bulb to work. Do you think, on that 1,001st try, he just thought, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it one more time. Or that anyone cares about the times that he's failed. No one remembers the times that he's failed. People are just grateful for the one time that it worked and the result of electricity that we all get to experience. And it's just a very similar thought process and sense of belief. And, hey, I wonder what he would say if he was on your podcast now.
Yeah. It's so powerful, that, isn't it? It's just this like keep going, because so often in life we quote unquote say we failed, right?
Right.
At something, and it's actually because we either didn't really try, right? Or we gave up before we might have actually succeeded at that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And like what I'm also hearing, and this is something we talk about a lot in with our coaching, is like who you were being, right? Like the person you were being when you were looking for a job, you were being someone who's going to find a job. You were being someone who is determined to find a job, right? And like that was what transpired for you in your life, right? So you were being a person who is totally dedicated to creating work, right, for yourself. Be that through some of the mental, the gratitude, like being grateful, going to the gym, working out, giving yourself. Also, it's lovely to have something to do, keeping on believing in yourself, but also, commitment as well, commitment to not giving up, right? All of that as a cocktail creates you as being someone who is going to find a job, is going to get the thing that you want, and in that time, it was like, getting a job, right? Even though there was all these other things that were stacked against you, right? Let's be honest, as you mentioned it before, like, living with cerebral palsy, having disability, that, employers will be prejudiced against you, right? From seeing a CV or coming in, but actually you didn't allow that known prejudice that you knew about, right, to stop you from being someone and believing and creating yourself as being someone who's going to find a job. Yeah. And overcome all the kind of rejection. And I'm saying this again and again for the listeners, right?
Yeah.
Because like, think to yourself, listener, like where in your life there's something you're going for, there's something that you want, right? And are you being the person that is required to get that thing, to create that thing, right? A lot of the work that I do with people is around dating and relationships and intimacy. And it's like, are you being the person who's determined and won't give up and is showing up to create the relationship or find the dating life you want? Because like I'm hearing from Samuel here, like, and I know Samuel well enough because we've worked together for a little while, is like he's being that person, right? Irrespective of the feedback that's coming his way that's not about him, right? Because when you're looking for a job, you're getting kind of quote unquote rejection, right? A lot of people take that feedback as meaning something about who they are and their capability, right? And like, I know from our conversation here that that's not something you were doing, right? You were coming back to your belief and your ethic of not giving up. Is there anything in that actually that you haven't mentioned? It's like, how was it that you're able to, and maybe even some advice for the listeners, is like able to stay in that's who you are being the person who's going to create the thing you want?
A few things are really coming up for me here. And the simple thought of, I'm not taking on any meaning from what any person's saying about me because it's their opinion and it's not mine. I'm not going to make it mean something. I'm not going to allow it to be something. I'm not going to allow it to kind of hatch out of its shell and latch onto me and become a leech and suck everything that should be inside of me out of me, like so many people do. When I'm sat in front of an interviewer, and I'm thinking, damn, not only am I the best person you're probably never going to hire to work in your company or do your job, you could be doing so much more than you're doing right now and not be interviewing me. This isn't your full potential. And when you can flip it when I have the belief like, hey, any skill is learnable, I can be a better interviewer than you can be, than you're interviewing me. And seeing not only the potential in others, but also in myself, that creates a huge shift within you. Literally, you feel it within your body. You walk with, an air of confidence and self-belief, that it's God. I mean, it kind of reminds me of someone said this wonderful quote about, the actor Sean Connery, that he was the kind of man who could walk into a room and fuck anybody. And I'm not saying that that's me, but you almost need to have that sense of belief that, you can walk into any situation and you can own it and you can be it and you can do it. To your listeners, we aren't here to be average. My dad would always tell me that. I'm not here to be average, and neither are you. And, a person who's never made a mistake has never made anything. So, keep making mistakes, because you can make any mistake you want in your life once, whatever, it doesn't matter. But as long as you can learn from that and you can not make it again, go for it. Keep mucking up, keep learning about yourself. Because when you are able to create these shifts within you, life truly isn't the same again. I wouldn't be who I am now and have that belief that, I wouldn't be the person that I'm here speaking with you, or that I'm able to kind of give to your listeners at the moment, if I hadn't been through 4 years and 100 failed job interviews, or if I hadn't got a job, 3 years in, got told you haven't got it, got a second job, got told you haven't got that one, and then have to do another year. And it's character building, and you owe it to yourself to start building up you and who you could actually be.
Powerful. Yeah, man. Because it doesn't have to, we don't have to take on that meaning that other people have, right? That people say about us, whether they say, are we good enough? We're attractive. We're not attractive. We're not good at our job. We're not good at, communicating, whatever. Okay. We don't have to take on that meaning. Yeah, there might be some useful feedback there, but the extra meaning of, not being good enough, not being capable enough, all these things, that's other people's meaning that we don't have to kind of take on. And that's a powerful way to live, when you can stop making meaning out of everything, because there's taking other people's meaning, and there's also creating extra meaning about the things that are happening to you, right? I'm just thinking of my own life, right? As a coach, like sometimes you meet someone and you speak to them, and then they don't want to coach with you, right? They don't want to work with you. Now, I could take that meaning on to mean there's something wrong with me and there's something wrong with my coaching ability, right? And discount all the amazing clients who've had massive transformations in their lives, in areas that they, were completely surprised about. They're in relationships, they're happy, and all these sorts of things. But I could take this one person's no to mean that there's something wrong with me, that I'm not good enough, that I'm not capable enough. But that choice really lies with me. I get to choose what I make that thing mean, that, say, quote unquote, rejection mean in that moment, right? And that's a powerful choice to have for us as human beings.
Yeah, we always, I think maybe the majority of human beings, in fact, I hope they're not. So someone, email me over a stat if there is one, but almost seem to me to be hardwired to look at the negative in a situation. And my dad would be the opposite. He would always and forever be able to see the positive, tell you the positive. And I've definitely got that. The idea that we're gonna, we're gonna add on extra meaning to something that's gone wrong. That's like, I don't know, having a beautiful, and this would only obviously mean something if you're not vegan or vegetarian. If you have like a chicken masala, right, and rice, it's like putting a load of ketchup on top. People are so experienced about adding all this rubbish on top, and you're just ruining it. You're ruining what was there to to begin with, and instead of going digging for the gold, you've just decided to, not see it and bury it. And this is probably like a worldwide issue with a lot of people, is that, I would challenge anyone. You tell me your life story and I'll flip it for you. I'll give you the good version. I'll give you the positives that you haven't seen, you haven't been aware of. I'll make you feel better than you did at the start. Because people are simply so much more powerful than they realize. And if they put less time into focusing on, let's give a negative meaning to this, and more time into, let's use this, what was positive, to drive me forward to do something else, they'd be achieving so much more instead of, wallowing in their pity or whatever it may be. You wouldn't be staying still, you'd be going forwards. And that's the only way you can go in life, is forwards. I mean, you can go backwards if you want, or stay as you are if you want, but as far as I'm concerned, again, as my dad would tell me, going forward seems the only right way for me.
Yeah. And I see this as well with people, and I do it myself, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I wallow in my negative emotions. Actually, before I get into that, I'll say that there are studies around the negative bias. I think it's 4 or 5 to 1 that we pay attention to negative things, and it's also to do with evolutionary reasons so that we don't die. Because negative things, like lions and poisonous berries were a serious consideration.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But like in this day and age now where we live, and there's no poisonous berries, well, there's not many of them around. There's no lions hanging around. Most of us, most of us are not in the savannas of Africa, worrying about lions eating us. I have a friend who lives in Tanzania. She formerly lived in Kenya, and that could be a real and present thing. But we don't have that. We don't have that many things that kill us. And now we pay attention to the small negative things and make them bigger than they are. And it's easy to wallow in that, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm sure we've all done that. I definitely have. I could even say I've been doing that a little bit this week. But it's actually, a willingness and a desire to move forward, to kind of look at the circumstances slightly differently. It's actually creating a new perspective. What I'm hearing here is like, and this is the work that we do. We help people create new perspectives, because as much as I think often people want a solution to their problems, most of the time, the solution is a new perspective. 90% of the time for people, the solution to their problem is a new perspective. Because when we see things from a new perspective, we see new possibilities and actions, right? And we can start being someone who is inside this new perspective. I'll give you an example from my own work, right? I might speak to someone who is struggling in dating, and they don't think dating's good. They think dating's terrible and it's very difficult. And then I start to talk to them about what's been going well for them, right? What's gone well for them in the past, what hasn't. We start getting into the nitty gritty. It might be really small instances, right, of conversations here and there. And they start to realize that actually dating isn't that bad for them, actually. They've had some relative success. And when they tune into that relative success, that flipping or looking at the positive as you described, right? They start going, oh, actually, I can do this. And you're like, yeah, you can do this. And then they start to take action from that place of I can do this, right? And then the whole dating life changes. And I can see this in dating, relationships, men I work with their businesses and their work. That when we start to shift our perspective, we start to create new solutions and new actions. And those actions start turning out differently. The problem often is for people is they're like, oh, I've done that thing before and that didn't work. And I often say this to people, I was like, yeah, you did that before, but what was your attitude about doing it? What was your perspective when you did it? Did you do it from the place of this is going to fail? Or did you do it from this place of, yeah, this is going to go well. And if it doesn't mean anything, right? Because those two places are like night and day, right? Yeah. It's not just about the action you take, right? It is the attitude and the energy and the mindset and the way of being that you bring to that action that actually creates the fuel to create transformation in our lives, And I know from our conversations, it's like, you look for a job for 4 years, right? And there were probably people on a similar track to you. Knew, I know you went to various groups around finding jobs and so forth.
Yeah.
And they didn't have the mentality that you did around looking for work, right? They didn't have the mentality of like, I'm not going to give up. This is going to happen. And I imagine for them, the process of looking for work was a lot harder, a lot more painful, a lot more difficult, if only just mentally for them.
Yeah, I mean, I've no doubt if you're going into a group like I was in, and you're leaving buzzing that you've applied for the part-time job of the Christmas elf, and this is a real example. And it's for them, this has been a punch the air moment, a punch the air couple of hours that they've got off this application, because they truly believe either in themselves or by the people that they've been there to help them to beef up their CV or whatever you want to call it, that they're not focusing on all the things they've achieved, that they're writing them a very bland, generic CV to get a bland, generic job for a bland, generic person who has kind of bland, generic disabilities. This all adds up to someone looking out thinking, I'm a really bland and generic person. And that's not true. And this almost, indoctrination of this is how the outside society sees you. We're now going to put this belief into you. And I always think this when I see someone with disability in any role doing a more of a menial task. And, to be clear, any job contributes to society. Any job is a meaningful job, no matter what it may be. I think it's so important that everyone realizes the importance of what they do and the service. We've come back to this a lot, the service that they're providing for people. But I think that could be me. This is the version of me that didn't go for it, that settled for the hand I was dealt and didn't, take on the stories I was told, that didn't, think that when, little baby Samuel has just come into the world, I've got aunts and uncles running to the nearby church, and you've got the nuns praying for me, and they're having to give them a gift. And I think they brought them at one point, it was a tin of salmon, that's all they could get. So, and, if you think you've got groups of people like praying for my survival, for my being here, if they would see me as an embodiment of the answers to their prayers, then I better use my time wisely, and I better be all that I can be and show the world that, you may have X, Y, Z, but it doesn't actually mean anything about you. It's not going to stop you from getting anything. You could have no legs and run a London marathon. I'm not kidding. It's completely possible. And these blocks that any and everyone's putting into, us simply need to stop.
Yeah. You don't have to take on other people's stories about us. And this is, this is the work that you do with your clients is like being that person in their life that believes of what they're capable of doing, irrespective of how they see themselves, right? And being that person that helps them change their perspectives. I'd love you to talk a little bit about how you, the sort of issues and problems that clients come to you with.
So a lot of it really is around, I was going to say what we find is it's around perspective, but the initial, this is what I want to talk about, is it could simply be that they don't realize this, but they want someone to listen to them. They want to be heard. They want to be understood in a way that they've never had this in their life. They haven't had, for me, it was my dad. They haven't had that figure in their life that's really wanting to listen, understand, see their possibility and their potential and what's possible. And they themselves really realize after a while, well, I'm capable of so much more than I thought I was. And I can only respond to that and say, yes, you are. Yes, you are. You are unlimited potential. And the belief of I'm not worthy enough, or I can't have that. These really basic thoughts are They're basic thoughts, but they're huge blockers to everything that they think they can't have, but they secretly want. So a lot of the work I do is removing these really limiting obstacles for people.
And that's it makes such a difference across the board in people's lives, right? Because when we believe that, something isn't possible for us, we experience life as that thing isn't possible for us. Say you want, I don't know, I often think of relationships because I do it with so many people who want to be in relationships, but maybe people want to have a really active and fun social life, but if you don't believe that's something you can have, right? And you take actions from the place of not believing, right? And you hold on to the perspective and you defend the perspective of not being able to have. That's going to continue to be your experience. And, I know from the many conversations I've had that, you've had powerful conversations and shifts in people's lives and them starting to see like, oh, holy shit, like I can have this thing I want.
Yeah.
Right? It's possible for me. I'd been living all these years with this idea, this perspective that it wasn't possible, or I couldn't have it, I wasn't allowed, or, I couldn't reach it, I wasn't good enough. And then to start to see themselves as someone that can do, that can have.
Yeah. And for me, a real thing that's enabled this belief of, you can have what you think you can't have is, I was born with cerebral palsy. I've had the absolute gift, the honor of having gone through quite a few operations to improve, to do things like move around kneecaps and all sorts of things. And the result was, my dad would always tell me it's probably going to be a 20% increase in walking ability, and it was an 80% increase. And if I didn't have this, my walking was getting to a level where I could have been in a wheelchair by about the age of 16 or 17. So I had a choice. Let's go for the operation and improve walking ability. Let's take a risk. Let's see what's possible. Or let's just not. Let's not do it. And in fact, recently, my sister had a conversation with someone who used to be one of my physios. And she said, oh, how is Samuel? Is he in a wheelchair? And she was almost breaking down, had to say that, no, he's not, because he's at the gym, he's doing this, he's walking fine. And I came out of that operation experiencing more. I can remember telling people, it's like I'm flying. It's like I've been reborn. I've got something more. I've been given something extra. And the fact that my surgeon would tell me, you could be on you could be the gold star on my wall, or, you've whisked through the program for the operation. You're really strong with your arms. Your recovery is incredible. I want to give this sense of new life, new being to the people I work with, because if you're thinking I can't have that, or I can't do that, or you're coming from, like you said, David, you're coming from this place of defeat right from the off, you may as well not bother. And that doesn't work. It really doesn't work. If you're working with me, it's the first thing I'll do is I want to get that out of the way, because that's stage one. Once we get rid of those really fundamental beliefs that I can't have this, or this will not work, then we see what's possible. And that's only when true change can happen for an individual.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got to move some of that stuff out of the way that's getting in the way. And often some of that stuff is we don't even know that is stuff that's getting in our way, right? We're completely oblivious and unconscious to it. That there's these ideas, these thoughts, these beliefs, these things that we hold true about ourselves and the world that are actually getting in the way of the life that we want. And it's a very powerful experience it's a life-changing experience to start moving through that and start to say, oh shit, that belief I had about myself, that idea that I held about who I was. Listeners, if you're hearing this, it's like, ask yourself some of the things you tell yourself about who you are. Whether you're shy, whether you're introverted, whether, you can't run a marathon, all these things that you tell yourself that you think you are, very permanent things often, right? Are any of those things actually true in reality? Or are they just stories you've been telling yourself so long, and that you're so comfortable telling yourself that it's almost more uncomfortable to say I'm not those things, and then start to investigate the space, the void of what you could be, right? Because that's also something that I know you find, I find that as well with people, is that, you know, when they stop telling themselves how anxious they are and how that anxiety stops them in life.
Yeah.
And they start going, well, okay, I feel anxiety sometimes. So who are you when you're not feeling anxiety? How can you be more of that person? And that becomes quite a powerful, oh shit, I've never thought of that, because I've always told myself that I'm anxious and that stops me in life.
Yeah, you know, and it's like nothing's permanent, right? Everything's temporary. No matter how permanent you may think permanent is. I mean, let's be real, even permanent marker isn't that permanent. If I want to get that thing off, I can get it off. It's not permanent. It's, you know, you're only just believing that the permanent marker, it says it's permanent. Someone's put a label on it and they've literally called it permanent. You're like, yeah, it must be true. But we're doing that for ourselves. We're tattooing ourselves with what we think is permanent marker, but you're actually just drawing, you're just drawing your tattoos with a load of pencil again and again and again and again and again. And, you and I need to be that rubber, because this is simply not true. And, I know you can speak of all of the, as can I, but I'm sure you have some really profound shifts that you've experienced in people through very simple, by removing a simple block, you've experienced a profound shift, and someone can come out of a session with you and be like, wow. And in fact, I'd love to hear that story. What's the most profound shift in the shortest amount of time you've had with, a client?
Wow, that's a big question. What stands out to me? There's a client that stands out to me who he didn't believe that he could really express confidence and have confidence in himself, whether that's inside a relationship, that's inside of work. And through a series of 2 or 3 conversations, he was able to see that the confidence that he had thought that he didn't have was always there, and he just ignored all of it. He ignored all the signs. He hadn't felt it himself. He had completely ignored the actions that he took that created success and so forth, and always attributed it to something else other than himself. And through the conversations that we had, I asked him questions about, what was happening in his life and so forth. And then he went off and took some actions in between. He was able to come back and be like, shit, I thought I didn't have confidence to do all these things, to, whether it's, for him, he was single. So some of that stuff was about that. Some of it was about work. And he was just like, shit, it's here. I just didn't see it was here. So I didn't believe it was here. So I acted like it wasn't here. And now I can feel it and I experience it being here. I'm now walking through my life as it being here. And I was like, yeah, that's it. And we worked together for a number of months after that, fine tuning that in various areas, whether that's, communication, love making, and, all sorts of things, really fine tune that. And also the times when he didn't feel that anymore, and we had to look at what was going on, the stories and so forth. But it's a powerful shift through just a conversation and some questions.
Yeah. And you know what? The reason I asked that is also for your listeners to really understand that this isn't just something I'm spouting. This is true. This is stuff that actually works. This way we attack and we approach life defines it, right? I mean, our choices make us, literally in every way. And to be able to think, just a powerful conversation can have the effect that it can is huge. And I really hope he's been able to go on, David, to either inspire others or to, give back, because I think when we pass this on, it's impactful. I think it's almost the easiest way to impact many people in their lives, simply by being who we choose to be. and the person's going to come up, people will always come up to me or walk away from after a conversation and say, wow, that was a great way of thinking about that. They've just like had a moment where they've just gone, and that's just like, that's priceless. And it's such a gift to give something so simply to people.
Yeah, it is priceless, because I think you said it earlier, one conversation can change your life,
Yeah.
Just being in the energy of people who act and think and be a certain way can shift one's energy. And we often don't realize how powerful that can be. We get too bogged down in strategy and tactics and stuff like that, when actually the power is often in our being, in our ways of thinking, that really make a difference. And before we finish up, time's flown as it always does. I'd love to ask you actually, this for yourself, who listens for myself as well, is we've worked together for a little while now, and it'd be beautiful to hear how the work that we have done has impacted you and has changed your kind of way of being, your way of thinking.
I always think back to the first conversation that I had with you, where you said, what you want in your life. And I say, oh, this is great. Someone's asked me. I think that was the first thing, is, wow, someone's asked me. Someone wants to know, wants to listen, really wants to understand. And I just reeled it off. And the list went on and on quite a bit. And at the end of it, you said, well, that's quite a lot of change, and that, change that you want in your life. And I said, yeah, but, I'm playing all out, and that's the commitment that I give to it and the change that I want to see. So immediately at that point, I haven't been judged by you. I've been embraced. I've been heard. I've been understood. What I feel is possible within me has been matched by someone, probably for the first time ever, if not for the first time since losing my dad. So to have that connection, to have that person in your life has been a huge change and a huge constant. Again, you're one of those 5 people I spend the most time with. And that ripples, that has a ripple effect in every other area of life, in interactions, in how you show up, in how I decide to be. So like point number 1, that's been huge for me. Without even getting into anything else, it's been massive. I can't understate that.
Amazing.
And I also think that you're closer to things than you think. That's what I've learned, is when you start strategy again, you break down goals, and you realize how much simpler things are to achieve than we think they are. And by putting in the right strategies or having the right ideas, the right connections, things can happen. Something that someone could hear as impossible or as not possible actually is possible. And to have that, I was going to call you a soundboard, and that's not the most flattering term at all. But to have that back and forth is extremely important. And it's really shown me this is the level, this is now perhaps a new standard, or the minimum standard of person I want to be around in my life. And that's what I've really taken from it. That, I don't want 5 or 10 of you. There's only one of you. We haven't touched on that, but maybe we have without speaking about it. You're you are an original. You're not a copy. There's only one of each of us in the world ever. There, will never be another one of us, because of the fact that our parents got together. Is like a 1 in 4 million chance, or something ridiculous like that. And to find others then that are of your, warmth, caliber, standard, whatever you want to call it, is important. So I've really been able to reassess the relationships I have in my life, and friendships I want to gain going forward, and of course the quality of relationship, of romantic relationship that's possible. I've always known what I've wanted, but again, you're able to embody a lot of those qualities. And also, I think, last point is really reinstall my faith or belief, confidence, whatever you want to call it, in, men can be great at conversation. Often I find women so much more easier to talk to. I find them to be better listeners. And it's great to have, again, a belief or a thought shattered because it's simply not true. And to see men doing the work, and to have you doing the work you do with other men, that's also meant a huge deal to me, to be working with someone who does the work that you do.
Amazing to hear, man. And it's been a real pleasure, working with Samuel. As the listeners don't realize that, there's times that I turn up to coaching sessions and I don't feel. No, sometimes, I'm a human being. Sometimes I feel down. I show up with all the energy I have, and I put all my energy to my clients. I might feel down. I might feel low. And just Samuel being himself lifts my spirits almost every time we speak. The possibility that he embodies affects me, and I'm his coach. He's not even coaching me. I'm just listening to him talk about his life. So, I can't imagine what your clients experience as an energy lift, as a belief shift, a perspective shift, when the energy is being focused on them. I know it's truly transformational from the conversations that we've had about the conversations you've had with your clients. So, I'm incredibly grateful to have you as one of my clients, because, you've really impacted me, and I've told your story to many people, actually, as a story of resilience, of a story of possibility, a story of what it means to show up committed, to what it is that's important to you, irrespective of what comes along the road to getting to the thing. It's actually being committed, and that it's not always about the thing at the end of the road. It's about the journey that gets us there. And, I see from you that there's a real deep embodiment and understanding of that the journey is the prize, not necessarily the thing at the end of the journey.
Right. And I think, in some ways we're always on that journey. Perhaps we don't know where we're going with it, or what the next step, the next rung in that ladder is. But we're always on the journey. I'm always the student. There's so much more, that the pile of things that I know that I don't know, which is huge, is so much more than the part of things that I know, like I'm recording with you right now, or that I know that I don't know. So, listeners, I don't speak Spanish, but the part of those two things together pales in significance into what I know that I don't know. So the fact that there's so much out there to learn, and for me to learn, I'm always the student, and I always embody that on my journey through life. And, give back as I go. This is really just the beginning of, so much, right? I'm just a baby in the industry and a baby in life, really. So there's so much to be done. And it's, that in itself just is enough to get me out of bed every single morning.
Yeah, man. Beautifully said. And I think it's probably a good place to wrap up there. Somehow we've almost got into an hour and a half. But for the listeners, who are probably, wondering how they can work with you, how they can find out more from you, listen to more about you, where can they find you? How can they contact you?
So Instagram is your best bet, I would say. I am at Samuel Adams Speaks. You can also drop me an email, which is hi@samuelspeaks.co.uk. So you can get me there, and I'm sure on different social media platforms at some point. TBC.
Awesome. And all those details are going to be down below in the show notes for listeners. And big thank you to Samuel, but also to listeners for, listening. And I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear from you. And I know Samuel would love to hear from you. What did you take away from this conversation? What did you learn from listening to us talk about, the dealing with rejection, the different things around Samuel's job? Like, what is it you can take away for yourself in your life and start to act on and start to create, because this is a powerful conversation. You start to see what's really possible for you when you start to shift your perspective, you let go of the story, because Samuel was a living embodiment of that, of not taking on other people's stories, other people's narratives about who you are and what's possible for you. So I'm sure we'd both love to hear from you, either of us. We'd love to hear your thoughts and your takeaways from this episode. And at that point, I say, thank you, listeners. Thank you, Samuel. And ciao, ciao.
Thank you.
I want to say a big thank you for listening. It's people like yourself that really help get the podcast out into the world. Especially if you're often sharing the episodes and the podcast with people that you feel just could do with listening, right? Can see a different way of being a man, maybe a different way of having dating lives and intimacy and relationships. So I want to say a big thank you. And if maybe after listening to this episode, you think, oh, there's someone actually who could really do with this, please share it with them, share the love. I'm really, really grateful. And if, you want to get in contact with me for any questions, or you want to talk about coaching or any working together, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at theauthenticman_, or you can email me hello@theauthenticman.net. Thank you very much.